Right. Hello, everyone. We should be live now. Hopefully.
Pete, have you frozen? I think I've lost my brother already.
Has it frozen already? Did we have a bad start? I think we're in now.
Are you back?
Yeah, no, I think we're in now. Yeah. So yeah, that was a good start, but we're in now. So we're welcome to another one of these tastings. We've done a few of them now. We did a few for the festival, and now we've done a few since for our core range tastings. And the idea behind this is that it's with our core range of whiskies, but also with some food producers as well. So we've done some from around Scotland. We've gone for producers from the Isle of Gia, where we did some Gia halibut. We've done some charcuterie from the Highlands. And then this time around, it's cheese from the Isle of Mull. And it's really just a different way of enjoying whiskey and also explaining our core range. So we'll go through them today. George and I aren't in the same room, as the clever ones may have noticed of you, the sharp ones. But I'm in Edinburgh in our offices here, and George is down south. We unfortunately aren't on Isla, as we'd love to be over there at the moment, particularly since it's sunny. But we're on different sides of the country. But we're going to go through the whiskies and the cheese. But George, fortunately, knows a bit more about the cheese than me, so he's going to explain his wide knowledge on the cheese world.
Probably won't take very long, this, but no, cheese has to be up there with one of my most favourite things. And when we were doing the test earlier on to make sure that this is all working, I was being told not to eat all the cheese. So you might have noticed that we've got this delicious cheese that we've been sent here, and I've already
Looks
made.
Like you've enjoyed quite a lot of cheese.
Yeah. Maybe just. And luckily, I'm sat down, so you can't see that, Pete. But you know. So Isle of Mull Cheese, just a little bit. I don't know a huge amount about them, but originally from Somerset, the family moved up to the Isle of Mull. We can sort of resonate slightly to moving to an island off the west coast of Scotland, and I believe it's a family-run business similar to ourselves. And one of the great things that stood out for me when I was doing a little bit of research about them was the fact they're 100% powered by renewable energy from their farm, which is great. And they've got these delicious cheeses that they make on site. And I'm now going to try and pronounce the farm, which I think is Skiabrua. I probably got that wrong, and I'll wait for everyone to come down the side and tell me I got that wrong.
Very good.
But the cheeses themselves, we're going to, as we go through the whiskies, I think Peter and I are going to tell you the ones that we think work best with each whiskey. But that doesn't mean that is set in stone. And by all means, if you feel that one is more suited to a different whiskey, do send the comments in. Do ask any questions. I'm not sure if Peter asked that. I switch off when he starts talking, but do ask the questions, and then we'll do our best to answer them as well. But thank you very much to everyone up at the Isle of Mull Cheese for sending me these beautiful cheeses. I look forward to eating them through the evening.
I'm sure you will.
And thank you very much. And if you would like to buy their cheeses, you can go to their website, which is www.isleofmullcheese.co.uk, and it's just flashed up there, if by magic. And so I think Peter's now going to start with a bit of the whiskey.
Yeah, as much as we're pairing with cheese, obviously whiskey is really what we're here to talk about on the whole. And Kilchoman is a farm distillery on Isla. I'm sure a lot of you watching, some will be Kilchoman fans who probably know everything there is to know, every bottling we've ever done, and everything release we've ever produced. And there will equally be some who've maybe got the tasting packs as a gift, or it's just tuning in to try their first Kilchoman. So I'll talk a little bit about Kilchoman in terms of what we do at Isla. So we're a farm distillery on the island. We started in 2005, and it was our father who built the distillery back then. And me and George are brothers, if you've noticed or not noticed. I can grow a beard. George is completely unable to grow any facial hair at all. But we are brothers. And our father built the distillery. Our mother works there as well, and we've got another brother, James, who works all the sort of sales and marketing side. So it's a family-run distillery, and we do things in a slightly different way to the other distilleries on the island, where we are built on a farm on the west coast. We've got barley fields in front of the distillery, where we're just combining at the moment. Actually, if you have seen on social media or our website, we're just hoping, fingers crossed, to get the last of the harvest in the next few days. We've got the farm there. We do around about 250 tons every year that we harvest, and we use that throughout the production. So we've got our own malt floor. We've got our kiln where we peat, get that smoky flavour into the malt. Then through distillation, maturation and bottling, all on site at Kilchoman. And we're the only distillery in Scotland to be a single farm, single malt, in the sense that it's from the barley fields in front of the distillery all the way through every stage of production, right the way up to bottling. And that's what we really built to do. My dad wanted to take whiskey production slightly back to its traditional roots, where, originally in Scotland 150 years ago, you would see lots of farm distilleries, excess malt they'd be doing it sort of a very small scale compared to these days, but it was sort of lots of farm distilleries, and that was how whiskey really sort of came to be. And then over the years, the distillery sort of grew up and up and up, and as whiskey sort of commercialized slightly, there was not so much need for the growing, for the malting. That was outsourced, and that real farm sort of barley to bottle side of whiskey production sort of got lost. So that's what we wanted to do and recreate. We don't do that all ourselves, so we don't produce all our own barley on the farm. We try and grow about 30% at the moment is what we try and grow, and we buy the rest in from Portela Maltings, who some of you may know on the island, and we buy our balance of our malting from there. But we do keep it separate through production. So one of the whiskies we'll try tonight is called 100% Isla, and that is entirely our own barley from the barley field through to bottle. The other whiskies that we'll try are from the Portela Maltings, the barley that we buy in, and the main difference is the peating level. But we'll go through that as we go through the whiskies. But I'm sure the thirstier ones amongst you are probably looking forward to drinking the whiskey and tasting it. So we'll get onto that. And the first one is Machir Bay, which is this one here, if you can see it. Hopefully you can see it. Maybe not, but hopefully you can. And this one is our main release, really. It's the main Kilchoman. And we say that because it's the one that's always available. It's the one back in 2012 when we first released Machir Bay. It was our first release. It was from January to December all year round. All the rest of our releases were limited, small batches, simply because of the amount we produce. To give you an idea of our total production in a year is around about, well, I think this year we're aiming for 350,000 litres roughly. And that, when you compare to the biggest, even on Isla, is Kalila. They do that in, 1 or 2 weeks. They're doing our year's worth of production. So you can see the scale we're on is a small farm distillery. So we don't have 7, 8 releases that are available throughout the year. It's mainly small batch limited releases. So apart from the Machir Bay, which is available throughout the year. And this one is from the commercial malt, from Portela Malting. So the peating level of this one is 50 ppm. So that's measured in parts per million. So as the smoke in the kiln, so you're drying the green malt, the barley, and that smoke from the peat that we have on Isla is really harsh and coarse smoke. It goes into the barley, and then obviously when you produce from that, it goes into the whiskey. So this is quite a high level of peating. But I think when you nose this whiskey, it's not a big, harsh, powerful, sort of smoky malt. It's the same malt we use as actually our Beg and Lefroy, Lagavulin, similar sort of peating level to what they use. But through the different production methods of each distillery, we actually bring through something a bit lighter. So it's smoky on the nose, but it's not an earthy sort of iodine medicinal peat you get sometimes with Isla. Some of you may love that if you're a big Isla fan. Sometimes you'll like that big smoky punch, but you don't really get that so much with Kilchoman. There's lots of fruits, and that's typical Kilchoman again. Lots of fruits, fresh fruits, citrus, tropical fruits. And it's a peat smoke, yes, but it's, as I said, not too heavy. And that's, again, what comes through on the palate, the same sort of flavours. And with the flavours that come through, you're looking almost what casks this has been matured in, because a lot of different things in production will make a difference to the flavour. But one of the big things is the cask makeup. And the barley, so the casks are 90% ex-bourbon barrels, 10% ex-sherry casks. So most of the flavours you're getting coming here are from ex-Buffalo Trace bourbon that we use, which is that creamy vanilla sweetness tends to come through a little bit. And then they got 10% Oloroso sherry, which is a bit of a richer, sort of spicier sherry that comes through. And it's a combination of those two that you get coming through on the palate.
Very good, Peter. You've been doing your research.
I've been practicing, obviously,
Practicing that a couple
in front of the mirror all day.
Yeah,
so just to touch on the alcohol percentage at 46% ABV as well. So 46 is our standard ABV. All our whiskies are natural color, non-chill filtered. So as you see them in the little bottles, if you've got your tasting bottles there from the tasting packs, that color has all come from the wood. It's nothing we've changed, nothing we've added. Some of the bigger distilleries out there or bigger whiskey companies often want to add a little bit of caramel coloring to keep a consistent dark color across their whiskies. But we like the variations that come through. We think that's a natural whiskey. It's only down to the wood that it's been in that color is through. And often you'll see the cask type because of the color. Generally the lighter color is that ex-bourbon cask, and the darker color tends to be a wine cask or sherry cask. So it gives a good indication. And the more you add into that, the more coloring you add, you don't get that insight into the whiskey. So, George, you have anything to add on that one?
Well, no, someone's almost said you.
Hey, Kevin, it's very kind of you to say, Kevin. I'm almost as good as my dad. I like to think I'm a little bit better, but I'll work on it just for you.
No, for me, what I love about the Maccabee is the sort of tropical fruits and the freshness that you get through from those bourbon casks. It's the Maccabee, when we launched it back in 2012, it was the first core expression. Prior to that, we had the limited releases of spring, summer, and winter, 2009, 10, 11, and then when we first released Maccabee, it had to be one of those standout Islas. It had to be something that was one of our sort of best releases, due to the fact this is the one that more Peter, because he joined the company first, would go into shops, restaurants, bars, distributors around the world and say, this is what Kilchoman's about. And it's a true representation of the style of whiskey that we produce. And it's always been a mainstay and one of the most popular releases we do.
Yeah. I did start before George. I did a lot more graft in the early days. George just came in after I did all the work and, got the brand out. They did all the tastings, and George just cruised in afterwards.
Some of it got employed by other people. Very good about the Maccabee cask strength. I mean, it's something that we've done in the past with tour releases. We've done a few tours around Europe and also in America. Which involves the two of us and our other brother James spending far too much time together. And we're not tasting any cask strength releases today, but Kilchoman at cask strength is something that is true representation of the distillery. And there might be something in the pipeline about a Maccabee cask strength.
Yeah. No, we are planning something with that one. So later in the year, there may be something coming out as a bit of a surprise. But the Maccabee should give you a good, as George said, real good indication of the style of whiskey we do. And if you're looking, I guess, to compare it amongst the other Isla whiskies, as I mentioned earlier, Lafroig, Lagavulin, Ardbeg, the Southern Islas tend to be that real big sort of peaty, earthy style. But Isla isn't all about smoke. You've got some other distilleries who are doing very lightly peated or unpeated whiskies as well. And Kilchoman probably sits somewhere in the middle. We're using really heavily peated malt at the start of the production. Our ingredients start with that. But then throughout production with the distillation, the still size and shape, the fermentation, the cask we use, all that is actually tailored to actually producing a really light, fresh and fruity spirit. So when you combine the two, it's not just the smoke coming through, it's not just sweetness or fruit. Hopefully what you get with Kilchoman is that really good balance of all those characters. And that's what we think we managed anyway, but I'm sure you can be the judge for yourself after you've gone through the 4 whiskies tonight. And
cheese-wise, Peter, what would you say?
So the cheddar. So for those who do have the cheese, the Isle of Mull Cheese have joined us tonight. So if you do have the cheeses, then the cheddars are great. I think with the ex-bourbon style of this whiskey, which tends to be a bit lighter, sherry matured, which we'll try in a second with the Saneg, tends to be a bit more punchy, a bit more powerful. So tends to be the cheddar that will go great with this one. And I think the smoked cheddar is something that works really well with this, because it's got that richness, particularly up front, quite a strong, rich flavour, bit of creaminess, and then that smoke, which obviously pairs really well with the Kilchoman. That creaminess with the ex-bourbon barrel, that smoke with the high peating level of Maccabee just works really well. The other cheddar that we've got is an unsmoked cheddar, and that actually will work with one of the bourbon casks we're going to try later on, which is a little less peated. So again, feel your own way into it, mix and match cheeses as you feel. But I think those two cheddars work better with the ex-bourbon barrels, and the blue cheese will work better with that stronger sherry influence.
And what we probably forgot to say is it might be handy if you, with the tasting pack, if you've got 4 glasses, so you can come back and compare the whiskies, because it's always interesting to see how they change, and that way you can try them with other cheeses. I'm saying that now, you've probably quickly drunk the Macabee, and so you won't be able to do that. But
and
should have said that.
Right, just to touch on the cheese again with the taste. I would get a feel for the whiskey first to taste the whiskey, but then once you add the cheese, if you have a sip just after the cheese, it really combines the 2 flavors together, and it's a great mix. And I think with us combining the whiskey and food, it's all about just trying to say that good ingredients go together. Wine is obviously the traditional drink drunk with food, but there's no reason why good whiskey can't go with good food, and those flavors should really complement each other, like this with that smoky cheddar. And it's not a simple cheddar; it's a really flavoursome cheddar that's got lots of layers in it, and it really is a strong flavour to it, like the Kilchoman whiskies.
They actually pair really, really well.
Go easy on the cheese there, George. Watch out.
Yeah, you might not see much of my cheese later on. No, but the Macabee being our mainstay, launched in 2012, and then we got to the point where we needed to add another expression to the core range. And in 2016, we launched our Saneg. And as Kilchoman is a relatively new distillery, we don't have the huge age variants to play with. So we use cask maturation to show the importance the wood plays in the final product. And the main difference between the Saneg and the Macabee is the cask maturation. If you hold the 2 of them up, which I'm going to try and do here, you can see, this is very confusing. You can see the difference in color there, and that is coming from the cask. So Macabee, as Peter mentioned, is mainly bourbon cask matured, 90% bourbon, 10% Oloroso sherry. Whereas with the Saneg, what we've got there is 70% sherry cask matured and 30% bourbon cask matured. And we use sherry hogsheads with the Saneg to get a little bit more impact and a little bit more sweetness coming through as well with those sherry casks. And a lot of you that are Kilchoman fans out there who might have seen the Saneg recently, there has been some slightly darker expressions available, and that's purely down to some slightly more overactive casks. And again, as Peter mentioned, it's all natural to what we do as far as the color in the bottle. But what I love about the Saneg is, especially when you taste it side by side with the Macabee, is that you get the essence of the freshness from the Kilchoman spirit, but the sherry casks have really come in and added a sort of more complex nature to it. You've got a lot more, whereas with the Macabee you get fresh fruits, and with the peat. With the Saneg, they're more on the cooked fruit side, the sort of sultanas, maybe a little bit of chocolate coming in with the peat smoke. And these sherry casks do give you a huge amount of flavor. And maturing with sherry and peat, 2 big flavors, you have to be careful of how you manage the 2 flavors. But the Saneg, for me, with that lovely sherry influence and the waves of peat smoke on the nose, and I always get a nice little bit of peppery spice on the front of the palate that again will pair nicely with the cheeses, and then this long lingering freshness behind it, almost a little bit of viscous, so slightly chewy and creamy, and that is coming through from those brilliant casks that we get from Miguel Martin with the sherry casks, giving those huge amount of flavor. Both of these whiskies are relatively young, mainly 5-year-old whiskey gone into the vattings of these. And it's, our father bangs on about the casks, and he sort of preaches to us that cask is king. And we almost have to admit that he's right sometimes. And this is when investing in good casks, when you've distilled whiskey and made your every effort to get good quality spirit, it then has to be treated well in good casks. And that's why Kilchoman is getting these fantastic depth of character at a young age, and those sherry casks really do come in and give you a lot more layers of flavour. Again, at 46%. And actually, Sannig has won Isla Whisky of the Year recently, up against some other Islas, and for us that shows the efforts of everyone at the distillery. I mean, the two of us sit here and we'll take some plaudits and everything, but it's probably not us that have done much towards this. We're probably more hindered than.
I don't know. I've been working hard, George. I don't know about you.
On the sales side, though, we don't whiskey people. I don't know what you tell people, but no, it's testament to everyone at the distillery that we're getting these accolades now, and the main focus we always have, especially with Maccabee and Sannig, is consistency. Being that they are vatted 4 to 5 times a year, trying to get the consistency is something that Robin Bignell and our father work very hard at, and we may have to pay them a little bit of credit, but not too much.
Yeah, you've got the same issue as me, I think, where you like to talk with your hands a lot. I've got the same issue. Almost like we're brothers, I guess.
Yeah.
But George was explaining a bit about Maccabee and Sannig and trying them side by side like this. I think these sort of tastings where you can try them in a sort of flight or range tasting like this is great, because essentially Maccabee and Sannig are the same whiskey before they go into cask. So same malt is used, same peating level, both at 50 ppm, same distillation, same fermentation time. Thank you, Georgia. I'm doing the hands. But they're same whiskey right up to the point they go into the barrel. So the same spirit has gone into the barrel, but it's only the cask influence then that has changed it. Similar age of whiskey as well. So you can see that the huge amount of difference in flavors that come just from the wood and the cask you put it in, which is why, George said there that our father, bangs on to us about how cask is so important, because so much of the flavor and character can come from that. It's not that the distillation, the barley you use, the fermentation isn't important. It's just making sure you get every stage of the production right, because if you put it into average casks and you don't mind where you buy your wood from, you're going to be hard pushed to get a good whiskey. If it's an average cask, you might end up with an average whiskey. And so it's just about paying attention to every stage of production, which is what we try and do. And you can see from the Maccabee and the Sannig, those sort of very different flavors that come through. Same style, on the base of it in terms of lots of fruit, that light smoke, but it's just, very different from that fresh citrus fruit onto that darker cooked fruit. The smoky sort of peaty style has also changed in there. And if we compare it to the cheese, to the whiskey, you're sort of talking about those same sort of characters, really, where this is 70% sherry, 30% bourbon. So you still got some of that ex-bourbon character in there, some of that creaminess, some of that fresh fruit, but it's just a bit richer, a bit more earthy. And that's where you're looking at more maybe the blue cheese, which has got some of that creaminess to it, but then it has that bit more extra power, a bit extra punch to it, which generally is those sherry casks. I would say that the blue cheese perhaps works best with the Lot Gorm that we're trying last, but it's probably out of the 3 cheeses that the Sannig probably works best with that one.
A quick question here that I'll fire at you, Peter, from Travis, who is an avid Kilhoman fan who logs into most of these, about core cask strength being part of the core range.
Yeah. I mean, it's always the plan. It's just at the moment with our stock, really, I mentioned earlier about the size of the distillery, and we really did start small. The first year, I think we only produced 60,000 litres. And then as we could really afford it, really, we then produced more and more. Second year we went to 80,000, then to 100,000. But then obviously that stock was what we used when we got to 3 years old and 4 years old. That's what we released. So those early years really don't have much stock. We've increased production recently, and our idea is that cask strength will eventually form part of our core range. We've done some limited releases, which you might have seen, whether it's Maccabee cask strength or it's a quarter cask strength or single cask that we do. So it is definitely part of what we want to do, but we just simply at the moment don't quite have the stock levels to do it, is the simple answer.
Yeah, the cask management is something that is always an issue. Being a small producer, we have to make sure that we're looking after the future as well as the present. And it would be very easy to go through a lot of the casks in the warehouse and then suddenly be in a position in a few years' time where we're having to rein back. So I think that the plan is to move forward to something like that, but we just slowly, increasing production. Now we've just got just under 10,000 casks in the warehouse maturing. And as Peter mentioned, the bulk of that probably sits from 2009, 2010 to the present day. And those, filling more and more casks now. We're increasing production with the new still house that we finished last year. So in the future, there'll definitely be a plan, but we just need to make sure we manage those stock levels.
No, and I don't think in our dad's wildest dreams he'd have probably been sitting here today. When he built the distillery in 2005, the idea was maybe 100,000 litres, something like that. Hopefully, we sell all that if we really get lucky and try hard. But 15 years later, we've doubled production up to maybe 500,000 litres we can produce now, and it's unbelievable, really, the demand that's been out there, the fans of Kilchoman that have really driven us forward. And it's actually an issue we never thought we have, where we only have Maccabee and Saneg. These are the only two whiskies that are always available, our only two sort of very core range whiskies. All the others are limited because we simply don't have enough stock to supply everyone. So that's the reason for increasing production. But with whiskey being whiskey, it's 3 years before we even have that to call it whiskey, and then whether it's 5-10 years beyond that before we release it. So it's a long-term game. And actually on the cheese here, the blue cheese is delicious because it's punchy, but it's actually really creamy as well. So it really does work well with the Saneg, with that sort of mixture of bourbon and sherry cask. It's delicious.
Also, because it's a relatively light blue cheese, I would describe it as quite a light, creamy style of blue cheese. It also works quite well with the Maccabee. And I think someone mentioned that earlier on. Because it's not one of these very, very strong, powerful blue cheeses, it's got that lovely creaminess as well. It works remarkably well with the Maccabee. So I've been a bit more cheese than Peter might have been doing, but
yeah, I'm surprised you've got any cheese left, to be honest.
I might not do by the time this tasting's over. At least I won't have any supper tonight. I'll just eat cheese. Yeah. Cheese and what a nice evening.
So the third whiskey of the pack is the 100% Isla. So this is this one here, if you can see that. And this is really, I guess, the jewel in our crown, really. It's really the whole reason Kilchoman was built in the first place. It was our dad's idea at the start was, I want to build a farm distillery. I want to take whiskey production back to its roots, grow the barley, malt it, show that that's still possible when no other distillery was doing it. Unfortunately, on the farm at Kilchoman, we can only grow a certain amount of barley. Doing floor maltings, you can only malt a certain amount in the hands-on sort of old traditional way we do. So that's why we have slightly limited. But this is the reason for Kilchoman being, and it's what we call a single farm, single malt. And in our definition of that, it's a whiskey that's been produced on one farm from the barley field all the way through to the bottle. And that's what we do with 100% Isla. It's the only whiskey in Scotland, the only whiskey on Isla to do that. And it's barley from the farm. We would have harvested, George, do you know this? I don't have it to hand. I think this
2008 and 2009, I believe.
2008, 2009 harvests. So I think it's all over
2007 and 9.
It's 7 and 2009 harvest. There we go. Got it there actually. So all the casks are over. I think it's 8 years old or 9 years old. So it's a bit more of an age statement whiskey because we do put that information on the net tag on the carton. So it's a slightly older expression than the Maccabee and Saneg. And also it's all ex-bourbon casks matured. So a few differences from the ones you've tried so far. The main ones being all ex-bourbon casks matured. The fact that it's lighter peating. So we have our own kiln. So once we harvest the malt, we then have our traditional malt floor where the guys are turning and raking it by hand, which is not much fun. And I'm glad I'm no longer doing the maltings over at Isla. And then also the bottling strength. It's slightly higher at 50% alcohol. So 3 main points there. And I think the first one you'll initially get, if I...
Just got a couple of questions, Peter, while you pour your yes. Whiskey. The name Kilchoman, where did we pick the name Kilchoman originate from?
So the Kilchoman is the local area at Kilchoman. It's got a small church up beside us, 3 or 4 houses there, and it's just the local area. And we actually like to tell the story of whiskey coming to Scotland through the Kilchoman area. I think there's about 1.5 million stories about how whiskey came to Scotland, and everyone claims their own one. But there is a story about a clan from Ireland called Macbetha or Macbetha, who came to and settled at Kilchoman, and that is how whiskey production came to Isla and came to Scotland. But I think there's plenty of stories who would rebuke that claim. But yeah, it's just a local area at the distillery.
And someone also asked the one that was in the pack is actually our 9th edition. So this was last year's expression, and we've literally just launched the 10th edition this week, which is making its way around the world at the moment. And the main difference between the 9th and the 10th is, as Peter mentioned, the 9th is all bourbon cask matured. With the 10th, it's similar age, but there's a little bit of sherry being put into the vatting. We mainly fill ex-bourbon when it comes to the 100% Isla barley and spirit that we distill, but we've always filled a few Oloroso sherry casks. So this will be the 2nd expression that we've added the sherry to, and it'll be a similar age to the 9th. So if you've never tried the 9th or you've bought the 10th, the 9th is always a great plate, give you a great idea of where the 10th is compared to this one.
I think I'm confused as to what's the 9th and 10th now, but we'll get there in the end. But the 9th one we're tasting now, anyway, hopefully some of you have the pack or you've got it in your cupboard. On the nose, I think one of the big things is, yes, ex-bourbon, but it's actually the lighter peating level on the nose. It's a real freshness to it. The other two had that a bit of sherry influence, had a bit of richness to it, perhaps almost a bit of a fuller nose. This one is that fresh feel. And I think that's always come through on the 100% Isla. Freshness, that citrus side of it comes through much more, and a slightly sweeter side too. And that's, of course, down to it being a lighter peat. We have a kiln, but it's a fairly small kiln we have ourselves, using local Isla peat. That smoke rises up, but we only do it for around about 12 hours of peating. So it's never going to get to that high level. It's roughly 20 ppm on this whiskey. The previous ones were 50. So it gives you a good idea. It's never an exact measurement because obviously there's lots of different factors after that. The distillation, the cask type, the strength all make a difference to how much peat you're going to taste, but it's a good guide. So lighter peat, and then on the palate, again, those similar flavors. And one thing I would say is, although this is 50% ABV, which is reasonably high in strength, and this is a 9-year-old whiskey, it doesn't blow you away. You might be expecting something pretty harsh, pretty fiery, but actually it's really light, pretty smooth. You get that real sort of creamy sweetness, the fresh fruit that comes in. And then, as I said, it's just a light smoke, sort of salty smoke that comes in towards the end there.
No, yeah, and someone asked about would we ever experiment with heavily peated? At the moment, we're sort of veering towards the lighter peating at the moment, but that is not to say that we won't do a heavily peated version of the 100% Isla. With the new still house, as Peter mentioned, increasing production, we now have a still house which is dedicated to the 100% Isla expression that we distill, and that will give us a lot more flexibility to be able to experiment. We've experimented with yeast varieties in the past year or so, and we've also started experimenting with barley varieties. So this will allow us to, in the future, give you expressions with different barley varieties and actually tell you a little bit more about the barley. And flexibility is something that is very exciting.
I think, on the 10th edition actually was the first edition where we've included the barley variety on there, which was Optic and Publican. So we're starting to, as George mentioned, really experiment, especially being a farm, with that early side of things. With the barley we grow, we're growing different types in different fields, running them through the stills separately to see how that taste differs, because obviously a huge amount of distilleries experiment with what happens after the barley, but we're really trying to focus on what happens there and the different flavors that come through. We've noticed with Concerto, I think and Sassy that we grew last year, that there was a real difference. There was a creaminess to the Concerto. The Sassy had a much more freshness to it, and so it's something we're learning, and we will continue to experiment there, which should be interesting. And that's why we'll continue to put, I guess, as much information as we can on the bottle there, giving you the barley varieties, the strength, the cask type, and the ages on the 100% Isla.
Another quick question there is about how peating levels vary when you're being aged in the cask.
I know you're asking me that. Well, I guess from what the experience we've had is the peating level changes a lot through all the process, really. It depends through the stills. You know, if you're producing a really heavy, oily spirit, if it's going to be a really light, fruity spirit, all that will make a difference to how much smoke carries through on the distillation, but then the fermentation as well, how long or short that is. And then also in the age, as you mentioned there in the question with the casks, generally it's the first 10 years where actually it sort of goes up and down. It doesn't necessarily just drop. The first 10 years is a bit of a mix, but overall, as you get older, particularly past 10 years of age, that peating level is always going to steadily drop. You're never going to find a real smoky, powerful 45-year-old whiskey. You know, it just will be that much more delicate. It will taste that much more of the cask and the wood. Whereas if you're really looking for a real big, punchy, smoky Isla whiskey, you know, you're going to want to go for that younger age because it will have a bit more fire to it. You know, not to say that the older ones aren't good. It's just really up to what whiskey you want to taste that day. You know, if you want a big, fiery, earthy whiskey, go for a 3 to 8-year-old. If you want something smooth, bit more rounded, maybe a few more flavors coming through on the finish or something like that, then maybe 12, 15 and older is something you want to go for.
And also you mentioned the cask in there, and when you use a fresh cask direct from Buffalo Traces, we ship our casks over whole, and that means they're fully intact. That gives us a huge impact of flavor in the early years. When we then refill that cask after it's being used, you lose a bit of the impact from the wood. So it'll just take a little bit longer for the wood to come into effect. And then that will allow us to mature whiskey for a longer period of time. When we started the distillery, it was all about producing a style of spirit which would mature relatively quickly in quality casks. And now we're looking to see how we can slightly prolong the aging process so you can have older styles of Kilchoman, which is something that is exciting to do. And we've got some older casks out there now, mainly fresh bourbon casks, and sort of 12 to 14 years of age. And it's amazing the complexity of them. I was actually over in Isla this week, and we were just finishing off the combining, and our father has been desperate to get in the combine since the moment we bought a Kilchoman combine, and he got his chance. He describes the combine as mowing the grass, but he did have to admit that it was slightly more complicated than he first imagined. Being able to have full control over the barley is something which really does give us a lot of flexibility. We decide when that barley is sown, the variety, we harvest it ourselves, and then that whiskey is matured and bottled on site as well as being distilled. And that is something that we're very, very proud of as a distillery. And it's something that we will continue to talk about and experiment with moving forward. But I did just try the cheddar with the 100% Isla, and the lightness of that cheddar with the 100% Isla, I think works really, really well. And with the 100% Isla, you get that nice little bit of creaminess coming through with the bourbon cask. We should have said, don't be afraid to add a little bit of water to the whiskies. You may find, especially at the higher ABV of 50, you might want a little bit of water in there that might just help you open up a few flavors that you can't quite get into. But that cheddar,
just trying that cheese there is good. And again, welcome to try the smoked one or the unsmoked cheddar. But I think the unsmoked one is perhaps of the 4 whiskies the best one for this because of the lighter peating level here. That unsmoked cheddar just is terrific because you get that creaminess. It's not maybe as rich as the smoked cheddar, but it's got a lot of layers to the flavor, and it really is a sort of long taste you get with the cheddar, and that's exactly what you get here with 100% Isla. With the higher strength of the 100% Isla, tends to help with the finish, so you get a longer finish out of that higher strength, and they combine really well. It's
almost like the cheddar helps bring out the peat and the smoke on the finish of the whiskey. When you had, well, for me personally, and everyone is different. When I was drinking the 100% Isla on its own, I was getting the freshness and the clean finish that is so indicative of Kilchoman. And then when I tried the cheese with it, it almost is the creaminess of the cheese helped bring out the peat smoke. And it's great doing these food pairings and showing people that, yes, whiskey is a very, very strong and powerful flavor. But if you combine it with food in the right way, you can really have this great balance of flavors. And choosing, similar artisan products really does help do that. And it's, yeah, I'm enjoying the cheeses, let's put it that way.
So we're just sort of really saying, just keep eating, keep drinking. It'll be merry, it'll all be fine.
Yeah.
That's the general message that we're giving over here. No, exactly right. And that 100% Isla is done in addition. So just to compare, the Maccabee and Sanneg, always available, very much core range. You'll see them hopefully most whiskey shops, bars around the country or around the world where anyone's tuning in from. Whereas the 100% Isla is done in addition. So obviously the very first edition, I think, was back in 2011. And then every year we've done a new batch, generally around about 12,000, 13,000 bottles each year. But each year, just a limited amount every year as we change it. And sometimes it's been the age, sometimes it's been the cask. It's always been different, but it's always been 50% alcohol and always our own malt at that same peating level. So you can really see how Kilchoman's developed from the first one, which was 3 years, I think in 3 months, to now what is all the casks over 9 years old and a really sort of well matured, developed whiskey. And if you do see the 3rd edition, the 4th edition on the shelf somewhere, fascinating to go back and try, because what it'll be is just much more spirit flavor, much less cask influence. So you're getting loads more citrus, loads more that it's almost like a farmyard sort of malty taste you get to the early 100% Islas. Whereas now with that cask influence, it's much more that sort of, I guess, vanilla rounded sweetness. And again, some people prefer the earlier ones where it had more kick, more bite to it. It was fresher. It was that farmyardy. Some would go for that more recent ones where it's more rounded, more developed, a bit longer finish. And that's the beauty of whiskey. It's, there's always something for everyone. You can't please everyone, and if you try, you're never going to succeed.
No, it is interesting to go back and taste previous releases, and similar to the 100% Isla, the Loch Gorm is the final one in the pack, which is, if I can just get it round to the right angle, because everything's the opposite way around. This is the 2020 version that we released in March. This was released during lockdown, and Loch Gorm is fully matured in Oloroso sherry butts. So whereas with the Sanneg, which we tasted earlier on, that was matured in Oloroso hogsheads, we used Oloroso sherry butts for the Loch Gorm, sorry. And the butts are 500 litres, huge, great big cask, weigh half a tonne when they're full, and are packed full of flavour. And the Loch Gorm comes out in edition, so each year we'll release the next edition, and the only thing that will change is the combination of casks used. It's always been Oloroso sherry butts that we've used, and now what we're tending to use is a combination of fresh Oloroso sherry butts and also refills. The reason we use those refills is we want to have the combination of the sherry influence as a sherry cask matured whiskey, but also we want the freshness of Kilchoman to shine forward as well. And it's always one that is very, very popular release, but at the same time, it's probably one that people either have their favorite style of the Loch Gorm. But for me, now we're getting into the slightly older, more developed expressions of the Loch Gorm. You're really getting that sort of nice balance of the Kilchoman peat and freshness, and then the layers of dark fruits and almost smoked meats coming out on the Loch Gorm. And this is a combination of 21 Oloroso sherry butts. And now I'm going to probably get this wrong, but I believe it's 2007 to 2011 casks. Yeah. And some of them are refill casks. And what that has allowed to really show the development of Kilchoman, especially with those older casks in there. And I always love almost like that sort of gentle, smoky meats coming out of the glass. Bit of sultanas and dark chocolate.
Yeah, as George was saying there, it's important, that balance where, we could have done a sherry matured whiskey and it was just packed full of sherry, great for some people, but it's all you taste is Oloroso sherry, and it could have been from any Isla, any whiskey in Scotland, any distillery. But what we wanted was very much a Kilchoman matured in sherry, and that's why I went for the butts. Early on, we did a few hogsheads releases actually, and some of them were just a bit too much sherry. They came in with a big whack of sherry and just died away a bit on the finish. But where the butts, which are big 500 litre casks, they allow a slower, more integrated maturation So you're getting the sherry coming in, you're getting the depth of flavour, but it doesn't overpower the Kilchoman character, and that's always vital. It's, for our point of view, it's what's the point in releasing a whiskey if it's not going to taste of that Kilchoman character? So that's what hopefully we've got in the Loch Gorm here, is very much Kilchoman in sherry matured, and it's again, as George mentioned, it's got that fruit and the Kilchoman, it's got that barbecue smoke. But if you think back to the 100% Isla that we just tasted, again, how much that cask influence can make a difference. Both around the similar sort of age, 9-ish sort of ages, but one is fresh fruit, light, vanilla sort of sweetness. The other is punchy, earthy, cooked fruit, barbecue smoke, and that's that cask coming in. Although obviously the barley is different, it's a lot to do with the cask as well. And the full range of Kilchoman we've gone through there, where 2 core range always available and 2 limited releases, the Loch Gorm and 100% Isla, part of our core range because they're released every single year, but just always in limited amounts. So that's why we put the date of bottling on them, the year of bottling. So 12 to 15,000 bottles of the Loch Gorm every year is released. But unfortunately, if you like this one, there'll be another one released next year as this one runs out. But we tend to keep them in a similar sort of style, all is Oloroso sherry, but just slightly different ages, maybe, as George mentioned, refill, fresh, that sort of thing.
No, it's and working with these big Oloroso sherry casks can be quite hard work. So to get the right combination of flavors when the vatting is concerned, and Robin back at the distillery is production manager, and he's getting far more heavily involved in the cask management warehouses. And the next edition, I was in the warehouse yesterday, and he's already put some crosses on a few sherry butts that he's earmarked for next year's release. So as Peter said, next March we'll be bringing out the next one. But the 2020 version is still available around the world, and the cheese that goes with it nicely, we believe, is again the blue cheese. But saying that, the smokiness, the smoked cheddar might pair nicely as well with that nice little bit of richness that you've got with the smoked cheddar.
Got a big chunk of blue cheese here. It goes crackingly with the Loch Gorm.
But you've picked half the cheese.
Yeah, I've got a huge lump of cheese here. The blue cheese is fantastic, and it's that extra sort of oomph. I think this the blue cheese has got with that Loch Gorm, because it is that sort of viscous nature, I guess, particularly the Maccabee, the 100% Isla, but in some senses the Sané has a sort of light feel to it, whereas the Loch Gorm is that full sherry maturation, has that viscous, slightly more heavy nature to it, and this cheese just works beautifully with it, because it's almost like it's a weird sort of creamy sort of influence up front, but then this cheese is sort of kicks in towards the back of the palate and has a real strong flavour. So the two of them combine brilliantly.
Now, there's a couple of questions just come in that now I've just lost, but one of them was about the Maccabee and Sané being non-age statement whiskies. They are non-age statement whiskies, but the rough age is in and around the 5 years of age. There are some slightly older casks in there. There are some 4-year-old casks in there. But the main thing that we're looking for is a consistency of quality. And because we use these very, very good casks, we get a fantastic depth of flavor at those young ages. The plan is to in the future to maybe slightly increase the age on that. But at the moment, we're just needing to, as we talked about earlier on, just protect those stock levels to make sure that we've got some whiskey in the future.
Yeah, I think it's important to note the non-age statement thing is always. I mean, we could probably talk about 2 hours on that side of things, but it's obviously the only whiskey. So the age you can mention is obviously the youngest whiskey that goes into that vatting. And for us, as George mentioned, sort of Sané and Maccabee are averaging around 5 years, but there's some 3, some 4, some 5, some older casks. So average is around 5. But if we were to age that, we'd have to say 3, and it doesn't do justification to the whiskey that's actually in that. And I think that's why a lot of non-age statements have come out recently. It's not necessarily that we're trying to hide the age. We're happy to tell people in tastings and things, but unfortunately, if we were to release that with an age statement, it would have to be 3, whereas it doesn't really do justification. But it's not even the justification. It's more, we can't tell people that it has other ages in there, and that's the issue with that. So for now, we have the non-age statement with 100% Isla and Loch Gorm. We have neck tags on there. We're trying to have a bit more information on on exactly what casks are in there, what ages, and things like that. So we try and give as much information as we can. And on the back of the Maccabee and Stannig is these QR codes as well. The QR codes and NFC tags. So depending on what bottle you got or how recently you bought yours, you can either tap or scan them, and they'll come up with a bit of more information about tasting notes, the casks that are in there, and peating levels and that sort of thing, and a bit of a video on the different releases as well and how they're made. So if you want a bit more information, then you're welcome to do that.
But if you don't have a bottle with one of the NFC tags, the QR code, if you go on our website, you can also see more information about all the releases on there. And like with the 100% Isla and the Loch Gorm, you can actually go on and go through the archives of those releases and see what we put into the 3rd edition 100% Isla or the 4th or whatever. So do go over there and have a look if you're more interested in the breakdown of the casks.
Charlie McIntosh was asking what our favourite cheese was, and it's a close call, but I think I'm gonna have to go with the blue. The blue cheese is just a great sort of creaminess up front and then a bit of power behind it, and that would have to be the go-to, the favourite for me from tonight, I think.
I would probably have to go for the regular cheddar for me, the regular Isle of Mull cheese, just because I think it's just a fantastic, rounded, creamy, delicious cheese, and I look forward to eating that.
Well, you're going to finish it pretty soon, I would imagine. And just another question there as well on the expressions of a single barrel or cask strength in the near future, and it's something we do a lot. Actually, is different parts of the world we do different single casks, cask strength whiskies. I think there's one on our website at the moment, which is an STR Finnish single cask at cask strength up at almost 60% alcohol. But for different markets all around the world, depending on where you might be based, with our distributors, we often do either bourbon casks or sherry casks or finishes in different wine casks. So there's a huge variety of single casks that we do, and they're always at cask strength. So it's slightly trickier to find because obviously single casks are only around about 200, 250 bottles. So they're a bit harder to find, but there should be a few of them around. But I think that's mostly it. I think we're almost there for this evening. We've gone through the 4 whiskies of our core range. Hopefully you've enjoyed part of the evening, all the evening, enjoyed some of the whiskies, enjoyed some of the cheese. And big thank you to Isle of Mull Cheese for what they've done. They put a discount on their cheeses for this event tonight and put a pack together. So big thank you to them. And it is delicious cheese, which George is going to finish and add a couple of chins to him this evening.
And we would say we are going to be doing another one of these, not with the cheese, but I think we've got some chocolate in the pipeline. So I'll be looking forward to that one as well. I might try and make myself available to eat some chocolate, but it's always great to do these. And if we've missed some questions, do send them in to any of our social media channels, and we'll get back to you on those. Something that you need a bit more clarity on, or if you want more information about anything, don't be afraid to ask us. More than happy to help whenever we can. But thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
We'll see you all soon. Thank you.